Good morning and welcome back. Sorry, I'm shutting my door to Everest. We last left them. They found that one rock formation that looked like a mushroom, and they were all trying to trying to get to the top, and they couldn't. And Cameron said, "Watch back. You stand back. I'm gonna do it." And then a small shower of dust rained down at the same time. His handhold crumbled. The one handhold in the rock. Legs windmilling wildly, Cameron dropped 15 feet straight down and bounced off the pedestal. He hit the ground like a ton of bricks and lay there unconscious. Chris got to the fallen climber first. "Find Cap!" he barked at the others. He looked at the trickle of blood coming from the corner of Cameron's mouth. "And Andrea!" Bryn, who was the fastest runner, took off for the complex. Sammy stepped toward Cameron, but Dominic held her back. "We can't move him," he warned. "He could have a broken neck." There was no panic. The candidates fidgeted in grim acceptance. In their sport, the thrills were many, but the mishaps were often deadly. Todd removed his glasses and held them in front of Cameron's nose. The lenses fogged. "He's still breathing." The roar of a motor shattered the mountain quiet. The Summit Quest candidates watched as an all-terrain vehicle plowed down into the valley in a shower of powdery snow. As it grew closer, they could make out Cicero at the wheel. Beside him rode Dr. Oberman with Sneezy and Bryn in the back. The doctor leaped off the still-moving ATV and rushed to Cameron's side. Shedding her gloves, she lifted his eyelids and examined his pupils. Then she checked his pulse. She addressed the 9 candidates who were hovering around. "Don't look so tragic. He's not dead, you know. Concussion, I figure." She scanned her patient from head to toe. "And I don't like the look of that ankle." All eyes followed her gaze to Cameron's right foot. No one had noticed it before, but the boot was twisted at an unnatural angle. Cicero winced. "It's broken, all right. He's on his way home." Somehow, that pronouncement percolated down to Cameron, who came awake with a howl. "No!" "Just lie still," the doctor soothed. "I've got a splint in the ATV." Cameron wept bitter tears of disappointment as the 3 guides immobilized his leg and placed him in the back of the vehicle. "I blew it," he mourned. "Everest was so close I could see it in my sleep." "It wasn't that close," Tilt told him mildly. You were going in the next cut anyway." "Hey, Crowley," Sneezy growled. "Ever consider a career in diplomacy?" "I'm so stupid," moaned Cameron, covering his face with both hands. "No," Sammy exclaimed urgently. "Don't you get it? This is exactly how it's supposed to go. You went out in a blaze of glory, making a move nobody else saw. It's poetry." She leaned over and kissed him on the forehead. "It doesn't rhyme," was Tilt's comment. Cicero regarded his 9 remaining climbers. "Everybody's okay with this, right? Accidents happen." Perry's mind screamed what his mouth didn't dare say. "Of course we're not okay with it. If this happens on Everest, it's going to mean a lot more than a broken ankle and a little concussion. It's going to be a 4,000-foot drop down the lowest face." But aloud he just murmured his assent along with the others. Chris spoke up. "Cap, I know this is the wrong time to ask, but have you seen this?" He held out to Todd's copy of the National Daily. "I've read it," said Cicero, throwing a blanket over Cameron. "I'm hoping it's just a one-time thing, but the fact is we had a spy who might still be with us. So think twice before sharing your life story. Remember, Summit Athletic is sponsoring this expedition because it's good publicity. If they start getting more bad publicity than good, they could pull their funding and cancel the whole thing. Then nobody goes." "And for God's sakes, tell them to stay off these boulders," added Dr. Oberman, "especially this one." Cap started up the ATV, drowning out the doctor's suggestion. 2 words he would never say to a climber: stop climbing. So there's a lot of risk involved in that. So I've seen some documentaries. Whew, not for me. I'm not a big risk taker anyway. So, all right. So medical log, psych profiles, interview with Samantha Moon. So this is the doctor interviewing the different people. So this one's Sammy's turn. Dr. Oberman, when you told Cameron his accident was like poetry, did you mean it? Sammy, when you're a climber, that's what you are. To go down tackling a tough problem is as natural as a thing as breathing. If you have to wash out, fine. But it shouldn't be because of a runny nose. Dr. Oberman, if Cameron had fallen on his head, he could be dead right now. Would that be as natural as breathing? Sammy, why worry about something that didn't happen? Dr. Oberman, people have died on Everest, 150 of them. Sammy, that's what makes it extreme. Dr. Oberman, you're not afraid of dying? Sammy, I'm not going to die. Dr. Oberman, how can you be so sure? Sammy, don't worry about me. Dr. Oberman, If the possibility of dying is what makes it extreme, and you know for sure you're not going to die, then it's not really extreme, is it? Sammy, are we going to look at ink blots or something? So, interesting. There is, everything has risks, so. Chapter 9. It happened just before midnight. The quiet of the slumbering sports complex was shattered by a deafening clatter. It woke every sleeper. Cap Cicero, still hopping into a pair of sweatpants, exploded into the hall with every ounce of the determination that had propelled him up the Matterhorn during the famous blizzard of 1998. Perry appeared at the doorway of the room he shared with Tilt. What was that? Go back to bed, roared Cicero, pounding down the hall. He wheeled around the corner, narrowly avoiding a collision with Sneezy. Calm down, the cameraman guide exclaimed. Nobody's hurt. Cicero looked past him to the utility closet. The door was open, and mops, brooms, and pails were scattered everywhere, along with bottles of detergent, floor wax, and bleach. Cicero picked up a deck mop and stormed up and down the corridor, banging on doors. Maybe you're used to cushy guidance counselors and child psychologists who think that busting up people's property is a cry for help. I work in a place where this isn't any vandalism because every ounce of energy has to go to keep yourself and your teammates alive. If Summit came to me today and asked, is your team ready to go? I'd have to say no, because any idiot who thinks it's fun to trash a broom closet has no place on that mountain. And 2 weeks from now, I'll say the same thing and scrap this expedition. Don't think I won't. He tossed the mop back into the closet and stormed off. I'll wake up maintenance, Sneezy called after him. In the gloom of her dorm room, Sammy Moon's face wore an oddly stricken expression. It was not Cap's speech that had her upset, nor was it even the grim prospect of having Summit Quest canceled. She gazed across the sparsely finished space at Bryn's bed. Her roommate was not there. Dominic lay for a long time after the disturbance, trying to empty his mind and will himself back to sleep. This was weakness. On an expedition, the ability to rest was as important as a good ice axe. Look at Chris. In the other bed, his brother was out like a light and had been since 30 seconds after his head hit the pillow. The dim red glow of the digital clock on the nightstand read 2:11. Resolutely, he got out of bed, pulled on his jeans and a sweatshirt, and shrugged into a down ski jacket. Carrying his boots, he tiptoed out the door and down the hall to the darkened equipment room. He didn't risk a light. The locker room was directly across the courtyard from the security desk by reception. He felt around behind the door until his hand closed on a helmet lamp. He pulled it from his wall peg, then sat down on the floor, laced on his boots, and let himself out the side entrance into the frigid night. Had Dominic turned on the light in the equipment room, he would have seen that there were post-it notes, washout notes, they now called them, on 4 lockers. One of them was his. He made his way over the rise, and when he was out of the sight of the building, switched on the lamp. Light flooded the snowy terrain ahead of him. The trees cast unnaturally long shadows like eerie pointers, showing the way down into the valley where the great mushroom stood. That had been his destination all along. When Dominic was restless, the answer was always the same. Go climb something. All at once, he halted in his tracks and switched off the torch. Ahead of him, the mushroom was bathed in light. Someone was up there. Staying in the cover of the trees, Dominic moved slowly forward. The ATV was parked 30 feet away. On the back of it was a portable floodlight, its bright beam illuminating the problem. Suspended there, dangling from the handhold on the underside of the crown, was Cap Cicero. Dominic's first impulse was to turn on his heels and run for the complex. Instead, he stayed riveted to the spot. This was one of America's top alpinists, climbing. He watched in awe as Cicero managed to gain a boot in the fissure. Then, hanging upside down, he literally created a hold out of thin air by wedging the side of his hand up against a 1/4-inch ridge in the rock. Dominic let out his breath and realized he had been holding it. It was a brilliant move that required amazing wrist strength. Maybe one climber in 100 could even have seen it was possible, let alone pulled it off. But, he noted, Cicero was still too far from the edge of the mushroom to have a shot at the top. Spectacular as it was, this wasn't the move that would solve the problem. Cicero retreated to the stem and began to climb down. Suddenly, he froze. Who's out there? Escape crossed Dominic's mind only briefly. Surely he had no right to be here in the middle of the night. But somehow he had the feeling that a true climber would understand. He stepped out into the light. Cicero was surprised, and not pleasantly. Alexis, are you crazy? It's 2:30 in the morning. Then it occurred to him that there might be a confession coming. He descended the sloped pedestal and leaned against it to catch his breath. Dominic approached him, squinting against the powerful beam of the floodlight. So what's on your mind, kid? Cicero prompted. I couldn't get back to sleep, Dominic admitted. Sometimes my brain just goes wild and I think about a million things one after the other. Tonight it kept coming back to this rock. So I thought I could, I don't know, study it or something. Cicero flushed with anger. Not on my watch. You're supposed to be in training, mister. And he stopped himself. Dominic wasn't in training anymore. Cicero himself had placed the post-it on the kid's locker. What was the point of being mad at him? Even if it turned out that Dominic was a Summit Quest vandal and responsible for leaking information to the National Daily, he was leaving tomorrow. It didn't matter if he was guilty of insomnia or a whole lot more. He was gone. Cicero inclined his head toward the boulder. It's a tough one, he agreed, but to tackle it solo in the dark? In answer, Dominic clicked on his helmet lamp. And you came here out here alone, he pointed out. Cicero had a laugh. What? You don't think I've got the credentials? Dominic quoted from memory. Summer 1998, Camp Cicero climbs every important peak in the Alps in 6 weeks. I had good weather, the team leader said, embarrassed. Dominic clambered up the pedestal and worked his way over to the stem of the mushroom. Cicero looked at the sky in exasperation. I thought I was speaking English. It must have been Cantonese. Yet he couldn't help but watch as the young climber moved efficiently up the problem. You won't make that handhold, he predicted. You haven't got the wingspan. Here. He shinnied up the stem to Dominic and positioned himself to provide a platform to get the boy within reach of the fissure. With a grunt of thanks, Dominic was able to make it to the cleft of the rock, using Cicero's knees as a stepping point. Then, carefully but with confidence, he duplicated the team leader's move. As he hung there upside down, the helmet lamp fell off his head and shattered on the pedestal below. See, said Cicero, if it wasn't for my light, you'd be in the dark right now, alone. Wait a second, and I'll give you a hand getting down. I can do it. The voice was not even strained. Slowly, exhibiting remarkable muscle control, Dominic reversed the move. But instead of swinging back down to the artificial ledge provided by Cicero's knees, he launched himself directly at the stem, catching on and sticking, Spider-Man style. Cicero replayed the reverse move and dismount with wide eyes. Of course, it wasn't impossible. He had just witnessed it. But someone of Dominic's size should not have that kind of strength, not to mention the guts to try something like that. Get in the car, he said gruffly. As they drove off in the ATV, Cicero noticed that Dominic didn't face front until the boulder was out of sight. Cicero fretted over the steering wheel. Dominic was cut, finished, gone, and yet the team leader couldn't get the kid out of his mind. He thought, is it wrong to let this boy stay in boot camp when he has absolutely no chance of making the team? Is it fair to keep him around just because I like him and I want to see what he'll do next? The next morning, the 9 candidates awoke to find only 3 post-it notes in the equipment room. 3 more Everest hopefuls were going home. Dominic Alexis was not one of them. Chapter 10. Chris, Bryn, Tilt, Sammy, Perry, and Dominic were still standing. Somewhere, Ethan Zaff made 7. By the end of the month, 3 of them would be gone. The Summit Complex scene of budding friendships, excited chatter, and screaming arguments became as silent as a tomb. As Everest moved within reach, the candidates retreated inside themselves and focused on their training with the concentration and tunnel vision only athletes understand. Sammy explained it in an interview for the website. Last week, we were supporting one another to get this far. Now, all of a sudden, it's me, me, me. There's too much at stake to be nice to people, Tilt agreed. Like he'd know anything about being nice to people, Chris muttered under his breath. But as the frontrunner, confident, affable Chris was feeling the pressure more than anyone. He had watched Ethan Zaff become a star by summiting Everest. Now it was finally his turn. His Dead Sea Sand could be headed for the top of the world. A Summit Quest spot was his for the taking, but also his for the losing, if he slacked off. My brother hasn't talked to me in 3 days, Dominic said on camera. But that's okay. He hasn't talked to anybody else either. Even the normally boisterous Tilt seemed subdued. In part, it was an effort to avoid angering Cap this close to the moment of decision. But it was also from just plain nervousness. To him, this was more than an expedition. It was his future. Mess up and it was back home, back to the paper routes, back to his life as a nobody. Who knew when he'd get another chance like this? Maybe never. So he kept his mouth shut while Cicero ran everybody ragged. A speed climb? Great idea, Cap. Of course, the slave driver didn't mention that they'd be doing it on Amethyst Peak, a full sprint up a 13,000-foot mountain. 8 grueling hours on the ascent, plus 3 more going down. Get this, in the dark. No helmet lamps, no ropes, nothing. A guy could break a leg and cost himself a chance at the summit that really counted. Congratulations, Cicero told them as they lay gasping at the end. You've just put a typical day's work in the Himalayas. Never mind that the whole Everest route was fixed with ropes, and the closest thing to free climbing they'd be doing was the walk along the Yak Trail into the base camp. Biggest challenge? Not stepping in the yak dew. Sure, Cap, anything you say. And when they had to wait an hour for Perry to catch up, Tilt didn't say a word about that either. Only Cicero knew why Perry was still alive in this thing when he wasn't fit to carry Tilt's crampons. Crampons, I guess they're called. Meal times were the worst. With none of the candidates saying much, there were plenty of empty spaces for Cicero to fill with boring memories of his alpine career. Did I ever tell you about the time on Gasherbrum? Once I was climbing in the Andes and there was this avalanche. I'll never forget the night I was trapped in a crevasse on the Vincent Massif in Antarctica. The others actually seemed to like those stupid climbing stories, Dominic especially. The runt's eyes lit up every time Cicero opened his mouth. And even Tilt had to admit that Cicero's greatest hits was still better than having to listen to Sneezy's dumb jokes or Dr. Oberman's probing questions. And how does that make you feel? It makes me feel like I want you to be quiet. To minimize his chances of combusting in front of Cicero or his guides, Tilt had thrown himself into his schoolwork. The complex had a computer lab where the Everest hopefuls could keep up with their classes via the internet. These days, all of them were clocking major time there. It was a way to avoid conversation. Even Chris, the flunk-out champion of the group, was a student all of a sudden. Not that Chris was going to have any trouble getting a full ride to any college in the country. Cicero loved him. He was going up Everest no matter what. But he wouldn't be the youngest. Not if Tilt Crowley had anything to say about it. Tilt slipped up only once in front of Cicero. It happened on yesterday's ascent. Low on the mountain, there was a steep rock scramble that led through a narrow limestone crevice, almost like a vertical tunnel in the route. It was simple enough for a real alpinist, but Perry was obsessed with his lines and bolts and pythons. The guy would top rope a flight of stairs. Free climbing spooked him. Free climbing is with no ropes or supports, so. He made it up the tunnel part okay, but at the opening he just froze. Either he couldn't find the foothold or he just couldn't compel his body to heave itself out into the open. Cicero was about 20 feet away talking to Sneezy, who was shooting for the website. Tilt could have reached out and hauled Perry up by the collar, but it didn't make sense to show Cicero that he had a climber who was either too uncoordinated or too chicken to execute a maneuver straight out of Mountaineering 101. Cicero quickly took in the situation. Give him a hand, Crowley. Tilt could have done it, should have done it, and the incident would have passed unnoticed. But then came the frustration, the anger that some person, some force was protecting this mediocre climber from the washout that should have happened weeks ago. And Tilt couldn't hold back. Maybe you should ask his guardian angel to come save him. The expedition leader glared at him. I told you to help him out. Tilt yanked Perry up beside him. The red-haired boy brushed himself off. Thanks. Tilt didn't answer. He was in equal measure enraged and terrified by the expression on Cicero's face. The I'm writing it all down and this is going to cost you look he had seen so many times before. That night, to stay out of Cicero's face, he studied so hard for a science test that he scored 100%. If he didn't get to go to Everest, he reflected, at least he was turning himself into a genius in the process. And a hermit. That was the plan. Keep quiet, speak only when spoken to, and pray. Medical log, psych profile. Now we're going to interview Norman Crowley. Dr. Oberman. Tilt? Is that a climbing nickname? Tilt. No, ma'am. It's a name I got because I used to love playing old-fashioned pinball machines. Dr. Oberman. Is mountaineering a Crowley family sport? Tilt. My parents aren't into sports. Dr. Oberman. But you are? Tilt. Just climbing. It's everything to me. I'm nothing without it. Dr. Oberman. What about Everest? Think you'll make the team? Tilt. Hope so. I'm really counting on it. Dr. Oberman. What's your attitude toward your fellow climbers here at boot camp? Tilt. Everybody's great. I want to make it, but I wish them all luck. Dr. Oberman. And I'm talking to the real Tilt Crowley? Tilt. What do you mean? Dr. Oberman. The word around here is that you're abusive, unfriendly, uncooperative. Tilt. I understand. Really, I do. Climbing is very intense, and to be up against a competitive group like this, who wouldn't be scared of guys like Chris Alexis and Ethan Zaff? I guess I come on a little strong. Do you think I should apologize to the others? All right, chapter 11. Crash! Bryn came awake in the usual way, the way she had come to dread. First, a murky semi-consciousness, and then dawning horror. Horror that had happened again. There she stood, pajama-clad and barefoot in the TV lounge, surrounded by shattered glass. The trophy case, destroyed. The soapstone Eskimo sculpture, broken in half where it had been thrown through the doors. Where she had thrown it. What's going on out there? Cicero's voice galvanized her into action. She ran out of the lounge, avoiding the shards of glass with high-stepping feet. I just put things together. I know what's happening. I know who's destroying the camp. A commotion in the dormitory hall. Doors opening, voices. She began to panic. She would never get back to her room without being seen. Don't let me get caught now. Not when I'm so close. The laundry room. She ducked through the door. That was stupid. They might look in here. Feeling like she was losing control of an already absurd situation, she climbed into an industrial-sized dryer and pulled the door almost closed. She jumped in the dryer. The sounds that followed had become familiar. Footsteps and groggy voices. Cicero's tirade. She couldn't make out all the words, but the message was obvious. If he ever found out who was behind this vandalism. But it isn't vandalism. The timing was everything. She had to hit the gap. The lull after the Summit Quest people had gone back to bed, but before maintenance arrived to clean up the mess. What a skill to become an expert at. Just be grateful nobody decided to throw in a midnight load of laundry. She crept down the hall, her feet barely touching the floor. Her eyes were focused like laser beams on the door to the room she shared with Sammy. Climber's habit. You never take your eyes off the destination. The next pitch, the next ledge, the next camp. She let herself in and paused, calming her racing heart as she waited for her eyes to get used to the dark. She had made it. She had pulled it off. Again. The light clicked on, and there was Sammy, watching her intently. We need to talk. Somebody threw the black igloo into the trophy case, Bryn explained, struggling to keep the panic out of her voice. It smashed. I know, said Sammy. You'd better get your brush. There's still some glass in your hair. As soon as she heard the words, Bryn knew it was over. That sculpture had shattered her Everest dreams as surely as it had the glass of the trophy case. She was going home. But what was home, anyway? A place to watch Mom and Dad snipe at each other through their lawyers instead of directly? To witness them dividing up the assets, the last of which would be her? The irony was that her parents, who had fought so hard over Summit Quest, weren't going to live happily ever after just because she was the next washout. Sammy picked up the moon on the nightstand. Sammy picked up the phone on the nightstand. This is Sammy Moon. Could you ask Cap to come to room 14, please? Thanks. She faced Bryn. Before he gets here, answer this one question. What's your payoff? What are you getting out of this? I mean, I'm good, but you're better. That spot was all sewn up for you. Why would you throw it away just to smash a little glass? Bryn was so downcast that she couldn't even look at her roommate. Her entire reply was addressed to the weave of the carpet. I was 5 years old when I started sleepwalking. I don't even remember it. Just the stuff that happened because of it. The window I broke, the stairs I fell down, the special doctor I had to see. I'm not even sure when it stopped, just that it did. It was ancient history until I came here. Honest, I'm in bed and then suddenly I'm in the middle of a demolition derby. Busted dishes, the ruins of a lamp, a tangle of mops and pails. And I can't remember how I got there. Sammy was wide-eyed. You have to tell Cap. A sleepwalking climber? Here, it's a broken trophy case. On E, it's a 10,000-foot drop. Bryn tried to explain. You don't understand. This isn't a part of my life. It's just boot camp. It's like living a pressure cooker. I know once I get away from here, the sleepwalking will stop. But what if it doesn't? It will. There's something freaky about this place. The stress, the competition, the feeling that your every move is being watched. You make friends and then you have to stomp all over them before they stomp all over you. I love climbing, Sammy agreed, but this is no way to live. By the time it's over, we're all going to be like Tilt. But once the team is set, everything will be back to normal, Bryn persisted. And I know I won't be sleepwalking anymore. Sammy was silent for a long time. I want to win that spot, she said finally, but not like this. We can both make it, Bryn enthused. It's a long shot, but it's a possibility. Or maybe you'll get picked over me. Cap's unpredictable. Who knows what's in his mind? Perry and Dominic are still here. Who would have believed that? There was a sharp rap at the door. What's going on in there? Came Cicero's gruff voice. Are you guys okay? Sammy and Bryn locked eyes. The decision was made in that instant. Is everything all right, Cap? Sammy called. You couldn't ask me that over the phone? Was the roared reply. Sorry, Sammy apologized. Did you find out who broke the case? And stop the fun so soon? Snarled the team leader. No, I want to give the person a chance to spray paint graffiti on the Kumbo Icefall. Go back to sleep. They listened to him stomp away. Bryn's eyes filled with tears. I can't believe you did that for me. I can hardly believe it myself, said Sammy Moon. That's interesting. Sleepwalking. I used to do that as a kid. They call them night terrors, where you run around and you're acting out your dreams. So I wonder if you were going to take her on that dangerous hike up Mount Everest and she sleepwalked, what would you do to help protect her? I know what I would do. All right. I'll see you later, guys. Adios.